Welcome to the Selling to Corporate podcast, where we're going to be challenging your sales beliefs around selling to corporate organizations and help you increase your bottom line profits every single month. I am Jessica Lorimer, your sales expert and guide in this world of selling to corporate companies, skyrocketing your company sales and making the impact that you really want in the world. Now, don't forget, if you do enjoy the show today, please do head over to iTunes and leave us a review. But enjoy this episode, and I am really looking forward to sharing some epic sales wisdom with you. Happy Friday. And here we are, getting ready for Christmas. I am so excited to be back on the mic. You might have noticed there was a quick pause for a couple of weeks. And actually, it was a couple of my clients who said to me at a recent planning retreat, Jess, when was your latest podcast episode out? And I had to say, actually, I hadn't been able to batch in time. I ended up with a chest infection earlier this year. I know that lots of you have heard me banging on and on the podcast about the flu that I was having. And it turns out that if you just ignore the flu and assume it will get better on its own, it in fact does not. So I ended up with a chest infection, which made it nigh on impossible to run all of my calls and record the podcast without coughing incessantly, which I didn't think would be good audio quality. So hopefully you've been enjoying the back catalogue of episodes, because we have over 100 episodes all about B2B sales here on the Selling to Corporate podcast. And I am excited to be back for a pre-Christmas episode, very festive. I'm not actually wearing a Christmas jumper or anything to record this. I'm just recording it with festive cheer. Anyone who knows me knows that I have a very limited amount of that. So you are fortunate that it's coming for this podcast episode today. But in all seriousness, today's episode is going to be a really integral one for you as you walk into 2026 and plan out what your B2B sales strategy looks like. Because like most people, we've come to the end of the year and now everybody is thinking about and assessing how the year has gone. And for some people, it's been an amazing year. I've actually seen clients who've had their best financial years ever this year, which I know for those of you who are thinking, oh gosh, I've had a year where my revenue just plateaued or dipped, or where it's felt harder than ever before, it can feel hard to hear that. But it also reminds you that it is possible, and that actually there are key things that you can do with your sales strategy to avoid that happening next year. Because we are in an interesting market. And, I've got an episode coming up that will land really just over the Christmas period. So anyone who is trying to spend a little bit of time away from their families, have a little moment of peace and quiet, take the dog out for a walk. Anyone who is doing that will be able to listen to that episode where I'm doing a little roundup of the things that I have spotted this year that have been really successful in B2B sales strategies and that have impeded them as well. So before we dig into that, it's important to start to understand what type of revenue we want to cultivate in 2026. And I think that the reason that most people have felt 2025 has been harder is because we have seen a shift in the quality of sales processes out there and the accidental revenue that they used to provide dropping off. So today's episode is all about the two different types of revenue that you can cultivate and how you can spot those types of revenue in your own business and plan for best practice processes in the new year. So before we dive into that, we've got a couple of exciting things, or I say I'm excited about them. One is I am taking time out over Christmas. I don't know if anyone else is getting to the end of this year and thinking, I have been a busy little bee and need some time off, but that is 100% me. We spent the year moving house, selling a rental property that I have, doing quite a lot of big jobs during traditional holiday periods. So this Christmas, I plan to do absolutely nothing. And hopefully and excitingly, a lot of you will be joining me in that rest period whether you celebrate Christmas or any other festivities over the period. The other exciting thing is that we are sending out metrics reports for the Expert Services Directory this upcoming week. And if you are not inside the directory, you are missing out on the most epic resource for qualified inbound lead generation. Seriously, over the last 3 months that the directory has been running, we have seen people who are already starting to generate conversations and leads from the Expert Services Directory. They're ranking higher in search functions, both in Google and in AI search. And they're also using the free starter guide that comes with their listing to regenerate other conversations as well. So if you have not signed up to the Expert Services Directory yet and you want to be generating corporate clients from the UK across professional services, technology, charities, and sports industries, make sure you head across to expertservicesdirectory.com and you can grab your space. Just click on the tab that says sales and you'll be able to grab your listed space and also find out which spaces have been filled. Now, moving into this episode, I think it is really important to, as always, start with a bit of a definition, because in this episode, we're talking about 2 different types of B2B sales revenue. And I honestly feel that these 2 types of sales revenue have been misnamed. And I talk about this a lot for participants inside our training programs. So if you have been part of the C-suite or part of Cold to Closed or anything like that, you will have heard me talk endlessly about the 2 different types of revenue that we're discussing today on the podcast and how I believe they've been misnamed. And it's really, really important that you understand why I feel like they've been misnamed, because the type of revenue that we've seen people generate over the last few years selling to companies has in some cases been best practice, meaning sustainable, meaning managed by metrics, meaning predictable, and in some cases has been generated by people running faulty sales processes that don't always work or aren't always high quality. But because the market has been easier, they've still generated that revenue. Right? So they've been able to generate what I would call accidental revenue, because even though their sales process wasn't set up, even though they weren't doing anything in best practice ways, or even though they weren't doing everything in a best practice way, they were still landing some deals. Now that is all about to change in 2026. And if you are wondering why that's about to change, I've recorded podcast episodes over the last month that have talked about how the ways that we've operated in 2025 are not going to work in 2026. So make sure you go back, take a listen to those episodes, because we've got lots of things that have changed about the market in 2025. And if you want to go back and listen to that trends and insights, how 2025 is changing the way you need to sell in 2026 episode, it will really benefit you to understand what the landscape looks like now, because it does look different. And there is no room for the sporadic, accidental, feast and famine processes that people have been able to run in the last 5 years or so. Instead, people are going to have to be incredibly clear about their sales process, methodical and diligent in what they're doing. And that's how they're going to, A, generate revenue in this market, but B, position themselves as experts who are sought after when the market goes back to normal and make even more money. Because that's what happens. People who survive and thrive during tough markets end up being the ones who are the most sought after and who generate the most revenue in the following boom period. And there always is a boom period. Even if you're thinking right now, oh gosh, but Jess, the world feels really hard right now. How can there possibly be a boom? There will be. I promise you it will happen. I promise you that if you put in the foundations now in your sales process, you will be the people that are able to leverage that when it comes. But that is only if you understand what isn't working about your sales process and if you actually start fixing that next year. And that starts with this concept around the two different types of revenue. So the two different types of sales revenue that we have are long-term revenue and short-term revenue. And like I say, I think these are misnamed, mostly because if you listen to them on the surface, you think, well, long-term revenue sounds a bit boring, sounds like it's going to take ages to generate sales from it. So, maybe I'll just focus on the short term, which sounds like the cool option, but it's going to happen instantly. And in some cases, those names are more realistic, but actually they are not correct in terms of you will only generate quick sales from short-term revenue, or you will only see sales taking forever in terms of long-term. So what do they actually mean? What do these terms actually mean? Well, short-term revenue really should be renamed to non-ideal revenue, in my opinion. And that's because short-term revenue is often used as some kind of cash injection exercise. Now, this means that the revenue doesn't have to come from an offer that you want to sell all the time, and it doesn't have to come from an industry that you specialize in. So what this does, this non-ideal revenue, is create sporadic cash injections. Okay? This isn't to say it's bad, because there are going to be times in your business where you think, oh gosh, I really want to invest in, a new piece of software, a sales training course, whatever that might look like. And there are going to be times in your business where you think, actually, I'd like to take a little bit of time off, or maybe we need to buy a company car, or whatever that is. So when you have those moments in your business, it is very useful. It's a massive skill to be able to generate short-term revenue or non-ideal revenue successfully. And it is something that my clients have used over the years, using the proven short-term revenue strategies and templates inside my sales training programs to be able to create these bursts of revenue that they've been able to use for, whatever that might look like: investments, taking a holiday, taking a little sabbatical from work, going on parental leave, buying cars, like whatever that looks like. But it's not ideal revenue. And that brings me on to long-term revenue. Again, I think it's misnamed. I think it should be called ideal revenue, because when we talk about long-term revenue, what we're actually talking about is the revenue that is generated as a result of a best practice B2B sales process. So obviously you'll all know the Selling to Corporate framework by now, but I talk about this in terms of 5 steps that are really, really important for your business to business sales process and generating sales consistently. So those 5 steps are clarity, knowing who you are selling to and what transformation you're selling; lead generation, doing best practice lead generation. That means you are approaching and converting qualified leads, those who are decision makers and who have autonomy over the budget to pay you, into sales calls, convert them into sales calls. Business development, so best practice business development, so that you can build, maintain and leverage relationships to generate revenue consistently over time and maximize every single lead. Offers and proposals, so knowing what offers and solutions are going to provide the right level of transformation for a client, being able to price and articulate them in a way that generates a yes in your proposals. And then, of course, delivery and resell, or delivery and upsell. So the process of onboarding, delivering an epic experience for a client, and then being able to maximize revenue from that client, so that you're not doing lots of one and done sales. Now, that is the long-term sales process that we use at Selling to Corporate. And it's the long-term sales process that I've taught for the last 12 years. So it works, and we have lots and lots of data on it. But long-term sales processes aren't sexy. They're not in fashion. Unfortunately, for most people, they're not in fashion, because actually they produce these great results. Running a great long-term revenue process means that you create sustainable, predictable revenue that you can actively manage with metrics, so that you can always make it more efficient and more effective. That means that you create a steady, predictable pipeline that feels really solid. That means you have lots of opportunities that are always coming in, and avoids you panicking about revenue and profit. Essentially, a long-term revenue strategy that works gives you a really good baseline. And that baseline means that then you have the freedom and flexibility around your diary, around your home commitments, all of the things that you set up a business for. You have that long-term revenue as a base so that you can spend time doing more of those things. Unfortunately, it takes more work to set up a long-term revenue process than it does to set up a short-term. So what happens is that most people say, I want a business that gives me freedom, flexibility, capacity to do other things. And so they should be focusing on building a long-term, sustainable pipeline. They should be looking at that ideal revenue. So revenue that comes from running a best practice process and gives them lots of opportunities in their pipeline, lots of ways that they can develop clients from being one and done into maximizing them, to have multiple deals coming from them, and meaning that they actually are able to troubleshoot their sales process so they can make it more effective. Trouble is, most entrepreneurs think, well, I can achieve that with short-term revenue because I just need to make sales. So we're always, as entrepreneurs, trying to balance immediate cash flow with the desire for flexibility and freedom. And unfortunately, without having a long-term sales process in place and developing that, you will never get to that point where you feel like revenue is easy, where you feel like it is steady, where you feel like you can take, 6 weeks off and completely relax because you know you're coming back into sales calls, to deals, to closing out your pipeline on things. Because short-term revenue and existing primarily on short-term revenue is like being on a roller coaster. So this is what we call the entrepreneurial feast and famine, because you can't live on short-term revenue. The reason that you can't live on short-term, or what I would call non-ideal revenue, is because you're looking for it from everywhere. And usually what happens when we sell any kind of short-term revenue offer or execute any kind of short-term revenue strategy, what we do is increase our immediate cash flow because we win deals quickly, which is great. We love that. We love revenue. But also, we increase our immediate delivery. So what happens is you do lots and lots of activity to generate that relatively panicked sale, usually because we, as entrepreneurs, we're worried about cash flow, there's something else happening that means we want to generate revenue instantly. So we do that, and we usually do it from a place, especially if we're inexperienced, from a place where we probably undercharge for the short-term revenue offer that we are selling or delivering. We also usually then have immediate delivery, right? So that might mean that you sell 3 short-term revenue offers, but you have immediate delivery for those 3 things, which doesn't leave you any other time for business development for your long-term revenue pipeline. So that means that you kind of go from this place where you're like, scrabble, 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 run around, do the things to get short-term revenue, make deals, have lots of delivery, you're at a peak, you're buzzing, you're doing all the things that you need to do to deliver a great experience. And then suddenly you have no revenue and you have no deals in the pipeline and you don't know what to do again because now you're in the dip. And so you scrabble, 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 and you sell a couple more short-term offers and you're back in that delivery mode and you promise yourself that this time it will be different, this time you'll prioritize business development, this time you'll do long-term stuff, and you don't, because you don't have time because you're so busy delivering short-term revenue. This is the cycle that I see entrepreneurs stuck in again and again and again. And it's actually the cycle I see internet marketers keeping entrepreneurs stuck in because it's much easier to sell you. This is the new quick way of generating a corporate client. This is the new thing that you've got to try. Instead of saying to people, actually, responsibly, we need to teach you how to generate immediate cash flow for sure, but also we need to teach you how to put in place that long-term pipeline that is going to get you the business that you want. And over the years, that's what I've spent, the last 12 years teaching my clients. how to do that, how to put both in place, how to use them strategically, giving them templates and strategies and techniques to be able to do both of these things successfully so that they don't have those crazy moments where they're delivering too much, where there's no time for business development, where they're panicking about everything that they're trying to do, and that they're having to just live in that existence of short-term revenue to short-term revenue to short-term revenue. When my clients work with me, they step off that roller coaster and we look strategically at, okay, well, how can we put pipelines in place that are going to build over your 3, 6, 9, and 12-month plan? And also, how can we leverage what you've got going on now? That's really important. And you might recognize yourself in these. You might be thinking, oh my gosh, actually, the last few years, that's what I've been doing. I've been bouncing around from short-term revenue strategy to short-term revenue strategy, but I haven't built a pipeline. And now I feel constricted, and now I feel panicked, and now I never know where the next sale is coming from. And I don't really get that many inbound leads because I'm not a specialist in any industry. And I'm seeing people out there who don't have the same skills as me, but they're signing more clients and they're signing them more consistently than me. And if that is what you feel, you have spent too much time on short-term revenue strategies. And that's where that fear, that revenue roller coaster has come from, is not spending enough time building out your long-term best practice sales process. All right. So what can you do differently? If you are in that phase where you've been bouncing around on the revenue roller coaster, trying to do the right things, but inadvertently spending time doing more marketing, hello, content creation, than selling and proactive sales activities, then it's time for you to do things differently. Like I say, 2026 is not going to be the relatively easy ride that 2025, 24, 23, 22, etc. have been. So you are going to need to invest your time and energy and money in learning both long and short-term sales strategies. Because if you haven't, you are not going to find that short-term sales strategies are as effective at generating the big bursts of revenue that they have been over the last couple of years. In fact, you're going to find that you start to run out of short-term revenue offers that quote unquote work and that generate revenue. And instead, you're going to be feeling really panicked and like nothing is working for you. You'll see revenues dip, you'll see plateaus, and you'll also feel more stressed and like you've worked harder than ever before. So if any of that feels like where you are, you've just focused a little bit too hard on short-term revenue strategies and not enough on building out a long-term sales pipeline. All right. And that is going to be integral for you to be able to build a solid pipeline that can be managed by metrics, that actually turns over steady revenue and gives you that freedom and flexibility for 2026. Now, we're actually going to be covering both long and short-term revenues at Converting Corporates in March 2026. So we are holding Converting Corporates in London on the 5th and 6th of March. And at the moment, you can actually grab a ticket to Converting Corporates 2026 plus a spot in the Expert Services Directory, so a listing in the Expert Services Directory to generate qualified inbound leads for a whole year. And not only that, but you will get access to Cold to Closed as well. So that is the 90-day sales course that I launched this year that had great results. We actually had somebody who used the cold outreach strategy in Cold to Closed and booked 8 sales calls in 4 weeks. So if you are somebody who is thinking, actually, I really need to build out my long-term pipeline next year, I don't want the stress and the panic of having to bounce around, keep creating these cash injections and then not have enough time for business development, I need to get it sorted, I need to not be stressed about my sales process, then definitely grab the Cold and Sold bundle. The link is in the show notes. You can go to smartleadersell.thrivecart.com/cold-and-sold-bundle / or you can just click the link in the show notes because it'll be much easier than trying to remember all of that. But if you go there, you are able to get access to the Cold and Sold bundle, which gives you a ticket to Converting Corporates in March in London on the 5th and 6th of March, where we will be covering off long and short-term revenue strategies. Not only that, but you'll get a spot in the Expert Services directory as well, and you'll get access to the Cold to Close course. So that 90-day sales course to really help you kick off 2026 in the very best way. It's been a pleasure spending time with you today, and I will be back in the next episode.